The Hydra had been reduced to 3 heads. 3 snapping mouths filled the broken passage, lunging through the shattered wall while loose stone rained around the party. The corridor had become a field of rubble, every step uneven, every retreat slowed by fallen masonry. Rowan stood dangerously close to the beast as fire swept across its wounds, cauterizing the necks before they could split again.
"Sorry, Rowan,"
came the warning.
"You are resistant to fire, right?"
Rowan barely had time to answer before the flames from Sariel's magic cloak struck both Dragonborn and Hydra. The Hydra recoiled, its remaining heads twisted through smoke, blood, and falling dust. Aluin held farther back near the doorway, unwilling to risk the concentration spell she was already maintaining. She raised her bow and studied the enormous creature.
Has anyone hit it with fire?
Yes.
Good.
She released one arrow. It was not a heroic shot. It was not the heaviest blow of the battle. The arrow dealt only a small amount of damage, but it passed cleanly through 2 of the Hydra's remaining heads. Both necks collapsed. For a heartbeat, the final head stared blankly at the party. Then the entire beast crashed into the water. The Hydra was dead. Unfortunately, the water itself was still trying to kill them. The strange elemental presence rose from the pool, gathering itself into a shifting humanoid shape. Tavin rushed it immediately.
"I'm going to punch the water."
His fist struck with enough force to scatter sheets of liquid across the cavern, though much of the impact simply passed through its body. Ezian followed with a devastating critical strike, cutting through the creature's unstable form. The elemental shuddered. Then it collapsed into the pool and vanished. No body remained, only ripples. For the moment, the room was quiet. The party turned their attention to the Hydra. Sariel knelt beside one of the severed heads and raised his sword.
"We should open the skull."
Tavin stared at him.
"I have a medical kit. You have a sword."
Sariel considered this.
"That is a good point."
For once, the 2 immediately agreed. Tavin cut through flesh and bone, while Sariel watched for tadpoles, parasites, or any sign that the Hydra had been altered by the same intelligence, changing everything else beneath the mountain. There was blood. There was an unpleasant amount of blood. The flesh continued trying to knit itself together, though the regenerative motion weakened with every passing moment. But the brain itself appeared normal. No tadpole, no strange organ, no obvious source for the visions and intrusive thoughts that had followed the party through the chamber. Having established that the Hydra was probably not secretly a mind flayer, the party did what any responsible group of adventurers would do. They began cutting it apart for valuables. Attempts to remove the teeth failed. Attempts to preserve an entire head were even less successful. By the end, the corpse looked as though something far worse than the party had killed it. Still, they recovered 6 heavy Hydra scales and 5 vials of blood, collected with assistance from Orsic and his increasingly regrettable supply of empty containers. While the others debated the commercial possibilities of Hydra sausage, Aluin transformed into a swarm of small fish and entered the pool. Almost immediately, she realized the cavern was not natural. The pool dropped sharply only a short distance from shore. Beneath the water lay carved stone, a constructed wall, and a drainage opening buried beneath years of rubble, bones, shed scales, and refuse. The water descended nearly 30 feet. At the bottom stood a metallic plate covered in vertical markings and 7 empty sockets. Near it lay the Hydra's nest, a crude bed of large stones surrounded by fractured pieces of shining gemstone. There were no eggs. Aluin returned to the surface.
There is a drain beneath us,
she reported.
It has been blocked. There are 7 empty sockets in the wall and broken gemstones scattered around the Hydra's nest.
Sariel frowned.
The gemstones in this temple have rarely been unimportant.
Aluin cast water breathing over the group, and the party descended together. Sariel reached the nest first and picked up one of the broken gemstone fragments. The moment he touched it, pressure settled across his shoulders. A voice whispered,
"Remember the black shape."
Another voice answered,
"Do not."
Green light appeared above his heart. Then Sariel heard his own voice saying words he did not remember choosing.
"I have changed my mind."
A figure stood over him.
It is too late to carry the road away.
Sariel released the fragment.
This is not one of the black stones.
Aluin said.
I think it was one of the stones placed inside the dead.
A memory stone.
Taven said. Sariel gathered the fractured pieces and cast mending. The shards rose from the cavern floor. Light traced every broken seam as they rotated through the water and joined into a single gemstone. Then the stored memory escaped. The party saw dwarves seizing other dwarves. They saw bodies restrained upon stone tables. They saw chests cut open while the victims were still alive. And they saw gemstones placed where hearts had beaten. The vision vanished. The repaired gem became silent and ordinary in Sariel's hand. No whisper, no pressure, no remaining memory, but everyone had seen enough.
So,
Taven said grimly,
the torture allegations may not have been incorrect.
the stone did not fit any of the 7 sockets. The party turned instead to the clogged drainage channel. Aluin, Sariel, and Ezian worked beneath the water, pulling free bones, stones, and compacted debris. Eventually, they reached one large polished rock, wedged tightly across the opening. Together, they tore it loose. The current struck them immediately. Water surged through the newly opened channel with enough force to drag them into the drain. They caught themselves against the stone and held on as the entire pool began to empty around them. Something moved inside the current, something shaped like water moving faster than the water around it. The elemental had not died, it had fled into the machinery. As the water level dropped, a broad stairway emerged from beneath the pool. A central channel remained flooded, pulsing with a pressure wave approximately once every 2 minutes. And only then did the intrusive thoughts finally stop. Not when the Hydra died, not when the elemental vanished, when the water began flowing again. Aluin returned to fish form and entered one of the narrow channels. The passage descended, divided, and curved through the stone. She chose the left route. It continued for an alarming distance. The tunnel leveled out and then began bending upward in a vast spiral. Every 2 minutes, another pressure wave traveled through the water. Aluin swam for nearly 50 minutes without reaching the end. Eventually, concerned by how long she had been gone, she turned back. While waiting, the others rested beside the exposed mechanism. Orsic studied the 7 empty sockets.
This is not simply a drain.
He concluded,
It is part of an ancient machine.
What activates it?
Orsic stared at the empty spaces.
Presumably something we do not currently possess.
The right-hand channel remained unexplored. The party moved on. Ahead, a narrow passage ended at 2 doors. Sariel translated the dwarvish inscriptions.
The honored dead.
He said, indicating the intact northern door. Then he looked toward the damaged door hanging from its hinges.
The relics of the dead.
A crumbling skull lay beside it. The skull was elongated, with enormous eye sockets and 4 openings where tentacles had once grown. A mind flayer. Then Rowan looked farther down the corridor. Taven lay face down in a pool of blood. Rowan turned. The real Taven stood directly behind him. Everyone stared between the 2 bodies.
That is me.
Taven said.
My first instinct is to attack it.
Sariel replied.
Attack me.
The dead one.
How do you know I'm not the false one?
That is easily resolved. If the dead one is you, then we attack this one.
Aluin ended the argument with Dispel Magic. The corpse faded. Nothing remained. Inside the damaged reliquary, shattered pedestals and broken display cases covered the floor. The plaques did not preserve names, they preserved relationships. Spouse, student, first command, last forgiveness, child who survived. Against one display rested the headless skeleton of a mind flayer. The broken neck matched the skull outside. Whatever had happened here, the creature had breached the reliquary and died violently. Then the whispers began. Sariel heard.
Your brother,
Taven heard.
your mother,
Aluin heard.
your husband,
Rowan heard.
your family.
Ezian heard nothing. Sariel touched his head.
I had a brother. I know that. But I do not remember what happened to him.
Taven approached the plaque associated with his mother. Memories flooded through him. some real, some false, all tangled together until he could no longer immediately tell which moments had actually happened. Searching the ruined room, the party found 8 beads of force sealed in a metal case. They also recovered a small blank plaque made from green-black stone. Orsic examined it, but could offer no explanation.
It is peculiar,
He said,
and probably important.
That describes most things we find here.
Sariel answered. The party entered the chamber of the honored dead. 14 upright sarcophagi lined the narrow room. Behind the carved ribs of every resting dwarf, a gemstone glowed faintly. A towering clay golem turned towards Sariel, runes pushed outward through its chest. Sariel translated,
Not your name, not your memory, not your gift to give. State why you enter. For faith and justice.
Sariel said. New runes appeared.
What will you do with what you find? Protect it.
The golem waited. Then another voice seemed to move through Sariel. He answered in Dwarvish, though the words did not feel entirely his own.
What lies here is not ours to name. We enter to return what belongs to the dead. We will leave without claim, but bear the power to refuse.
The golem pressed one fist against its chest.
Pass without claim, pass without opening. Return what is taken, or perish.
It sensed the repaired gemstone in Sariel's possession and directed him toward an empty resting place. Sariel returned the stone. The golem permitted 3 questions. First, the party confirmed that returning the stone had been proper. Then Sariel asked,
What lies beyond?
A prison.
No further explanation came. For the final question, Orsic asked,
How should we show respect to Dumathoin the Wanderer?
The golem answered.
Restore the temple.
It then raised one hand. Pain burned briefly through every member of the party. When they opened their palms, each bore a new mark shaped like a mountain. The group passed through without opening the sarcophagi or disturbing the stones. They did, however, notice dozens of tally marks carved across every lid, sometimes 50, 70, or even 80 marks on a single tomb. Nearby inscriptions resisted every attempt at translation. They were not Dwarvish, they were not Elvish or Infernal. Even Sariel's magic could not decipher them. They were not language, they were a code. The party looked around the crypt but could not find anything useful. Instead of distrubing the dead, they backtracked to another hallway from before. They found a door and opened it. The walls showed dwarves measuring and constructing the temple above them, but the most important structure was already there, an immense cylindrical chamber buried beneath the mountain. Talhundrath had been built around it. Every carving centered on the same dwarf woman, identifiable by a broad ring. Her face and tools were rendered in perfect detail, but sections of the history surrounding her had been deliberately polished blank. An open sarcophagus waited beneath the carvings. Ezian approached. The skeleton inside suddenly sat upright. It did not attack. Instead, through Orsic, the dead founder asked,
If a giver no longer remembers giving, is the gift still freely given?
The party debated. Then came a second question.
If a god knows the name you lost, does worship belong to you or to him?
Sariel answered immediately.
Worship belongs to the god.
Tavin disagreed.
It belongs to the person worshipping.
The founder asked one final question.
What will you leave unowned when you depart this place?
Orsic answered her privately. Then she turned towards Sariel. Orsic translated her final words.
She says that you also know something was given. You also do not know the full shame of the giving.
Sariel placed a hand against his crescent pendant.
I made a sacrifice to restore this place.
The dead woman continued staring at him. After a long silence, she removed the broad ring and gave it to Ezian. The ring was magical. It required attunement. Its purpose remained unknown. The founder lay back inside her tomb, and as Ezian began studying the ring, the party was left with a growing and terrible understanding. Talhundrath had not been constructed to honor something beneath the mountain. It had been constructed to contain it. The memories stored here had not all been given willingly, and Sariel's sacrifice had not merely earned Dumathoin's favor. It had made him part of the same ancient shame.